Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Katee Sackhoff from The Mandalorian. And it was so nice, Katee, to have you appear as Bo-Katan last season, but now in season 3, you're really so central to this storyline. How soon did you know you were going to play this really pivotal role?
Um, I keep trying to rehash in my head how it actually happened because I don't think I realized that I knew I was in all of the episodes, and but I thought it was just like a negotiating tactic. And so when I actually got the 8 episodes and read them, I was like, oh no, they mean I'm in 8 episodes. Oh my gosh, okay. And I think that's sort of how it worked out in my head. Every season you sit down and you talk with Dave and John, and they sort of give you the lay of the land and let you know what's going to happen, and they let you know, but they don't really get into specifics. They get into like tone, and they get into overall arching themes and things, but they don't tell you everything. So you really don't know until you get the scripts.
Well, so much of her story this season is really kind of re-examining part of her culture that she sort of had written off, for a
Yeah.
while. What was it like kind of playing that arc and reintegrating her into this belief system?
Yeah. I mean, for me, having known of Clone Wars and Rebels so well, and having that be such a part of who Bo was for me, it I took all of that backstory with me into this season. And to be able to go back to Mandalore, and to see the destruction, and to see the things that for the most part she had a hand in causing. I think the weight of that is tremendously heavy. And so it was bittersweet, but I also have been thinking so much about Bo and her redemption, and the guilt that she feels over Satine's death. And I've been thinking about all of those things, and how we are greater than the mistakes that we make. But what if you make a mistake that's so great that it changes the trajectory of not only your life, but everybody else's lives? How do you come back from that? So that was for me an overarching theme throughout the season, and the choices that I was making as her.
Yeah. And I know you have a huge history and are also a fan of this world, but did you have to go back to your previous voiceover work? Did you revisit that at all coming into this, or?
I did for sure. And I made sure that I remembered all of those moments, and that they were all fresh in my head, because I knew that so much of it hinged on a lot of the things that had happened, even if it's just backstory for this season.
And there's so much going on with her helmet, because it's like she puts it on and she's like, okay, I'm going to be part of this clan now. And then the armor allows her to shockingly take it off. What is
Yeah.
it like working with those helmets? I would imagine it is sort of hard to connect with your scene partner when you have to
To
wear one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are challenges for sure. I love it. I find that when I put the helmet on, there is an aspect of Bo that becomes easier for me, because I only hear my voice. I don't worry about what my face is doing. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I can literally just hear my voice and make sure that my voice is conveying the thing that I want it to. And then I focus obviously on my body and my head movements, but it feels almost relieving to me to have the helmet on, because the voice is so prominent in my head, and that's how I hear Bo. Whereas when her helmet is off, she's so different from me, and in the movements that she does and the facial features that she has, that I find myself having to before every scene, I have to take a deep breath. I have to let my shoulders fall and stay still, which is a challenge for me.
There's a lot of stillness. I was wondering about that because you mentioned, her body and movement. I have to imagine the suit affects your physicality quite a bit. How do you approach her physicality?
Yeah. So it's all different pieces, right? You know, you mentioned before, like how do you connect to your scene partner? You know, part of it is that you get to know that scene partner so well, and you get to know the way that they carry themselves and the way that they lean and the way that, you know, like on day, you know, when I was working with Brendan, he knows that if I shift my weight to the right side and I lean on my right hip, all of a sudden that means that Bo's relaxed, and Bo in her mind at that point is not as rigid warrior Bo. She's relaxed into more of a grounded sort of personality where she's connecting more with people. So he knows those little things, and so we sort of play off that for sure as well. So the body movement has so much to do with it. And for myself as an actor, I'm not a big fan of like running back to the monitor. You know, I've seen people do this, and I find it incredibly annoying when you're in a scene with someone and they run back to look at the monitor. I think that there are characters in which we play where I think it's vitally important to know what you're conveying. I think in this suit, that is important. I have to go back to the monitor. I have to go back to the monitor with a clean slate and say to myself, what does the movement convey? And if it's not the right thing, I have to go back and change it. I don't do that in the scenes with my helmet off, because I believe there's an aspect of it that is a bit too vain for me, that I get a little too caught up in the insecurities of myself when I stare at myself that much. I don't like it.
Yeah, it would be easy to do that. And
Yep.
that physicality, they carry it over into all of the stunts and the fight work too. How much are you allowed to do? Because it gets pretty crazy and pretty intense on this
Yeah.
show.
I mean, listen, if they would let me do all of it, I would. You know, it's one of the things that I think as a default, when I started working, there were not a lot of female stunt doubles that matched my body size. And it's so much so that I've been doubled by a man. It's happened. And so the fallback was, I will do it myself. I will just do them all myself. And so I got really good at doing most of my fight choreography, if not all of it, most of my stunts. I was never allowed, I have never really been allowed to do big falls, like high falls, not allowed to do that. There are certain things that they just don't allow a lot of actors to do. But when you show up on a big show like this, where if you get hurt, it's not okay. You know, there is very little that they will let me do. And what they do let me do, I fight for really hard. Thankfully I have, you know, there were 3 different stunt women in my suit this year. Most importantly, Joanna Bennett, who is phenomenal. And JoJo's awesome. She watches the way that I move. She's so focused on it. She's very, very particular about it. And she's a phenomenal stunt woman. She is the Tusken Raider who had all those amazing fights on the train in Book of Boba Fett. That's JoJo. She's amazing. And so she makes me look very good. And so I do trust her. But there are a number of stunts that I fought to do and a number of fights that I wanted to do. And so it's a case by case basis, but that it would not be fair for me to take JoJo's credit. She is amazing. She did most of every massive stunt that you can think of and fight.
Well, I hope you at least got to hold the dark saber at one point during a fight.
I did.
Because
I did.
she's been
I did
looking
part
for
of
that
that
for
fight.
years.
Yeah, I did. I absolutely did part of that fight. And that was something that was important to me. And, you know, it was important to Rick as well. And so I was definitely excited about that for sure.
And you know, that battle, you have this epic fight with Giancarlo Esposito, and it is so emotional too, because at the end, even though you're kicking butt, but the dark saber's destroyed, and it's like this goes back years. And what is she feeling? Like, is she going to be okay after that? Is she going to find a way through that?
You know, I think it was such a beautiful decision, because I think that as a society and a culture, the Mandalorians have gotten so distracted from what really matters. You know, and you see in episode 6 she when she hears Captain Bombardier say that they are both royal and elected, you see Bo clock that. And she in her mind is thinking there is a different way. There is a different way to potentially lead. And so I do believe that for the Mandalorian people, it had to be destroyed because they have to get back to what's important, and that is their people. And I don't think that right now it's the job of one person to lead. I think it's the job of the many.
And I think that's one of the really cool things about this style of long form storytelling, because it's a moment that isn't even just from The Mandalorian. This is something that you have lived with from all the way back when you were voicing her on the animated series. What does that do for you as an actor to bring in years of history into that one moment?
I love it so much. It's so important, I think. You know, even when I play a character that is as simple as, you know, 6 episodes or something on The Flash, I come up with the entire backstory because all of that is so important to me. I think that is the backstory comes into play in the quiet moments when you're not necessarily focused on the words coming out of your mouth. The backstory comes through in the emotion that you convey in the silence. And those are the things that are really important to me. And I started doing that in Battlestar, where I was very curious about her backstory at all times. And I was talking to the writers all the time, and Ron. I wanted to know everything about her, because in the times when you're in a big scene and there are 10 people in a scene and you have no dialogue and it's 5 pages, who is she? Like, who are these people actively in those silent moments? And I think that's when the backstory comes into play. Who are they then? So it's really important.
Well, you mentioned Battlestar Galactica, which of course started you on this whole amazing journey playing a lot of great science fiction roles. And this year actually is 20 years since that first, the miniseries premiered.
Yeah.
Is there anything that, looking back on that time now, is there something you appreciate about it now that you maybe didn't realize back in the moment?
Oh my God, all of it. I mean, I think I have to remind myself that I was 21 when I booked that role. I had so much blissful ignorance of youth that was driving me and allowing me to play that character with ease, because I was so angsty and lost myself. I don't think that I always appreciated and was grateful for the work that I had, always. But I never realized, I never focused on things that were happening in the moment. Or maybe I focused on things that were happening in the moment too much because that's the way that I lived when I was young. That I never gave the grand scheme of anything too much thought until, I had the benefit of hindsight looking back on something you did that was so important for so many reasons. So many things. We're still all family, that doesn't happen a lot. And I've had that more than once. The Longmire cast is also family. There are casts that I think that you can't help but, after spending 6 to 8 years with these people, you can't help but have them be your family. I mean, I have been friends with the people from Battlestar longer than I lived at home with my parents. It's crazy. I mean, granted, my parents are still both in my lives, but that is a lot. Like, as an adult, to see people every day for 8 years, that's more than I saw my parents as an adult every day. So these people start to become your family, and the family that you choose. Yeah.
It's great to see, whenever a social media video or something pops up with a reunion there from the past, or just, maybe not a reunion because they're still in your lives. But, you've had a lot of science fiction roles from back with Starbuck what is the biggest way you've seen that type of genre evolve? Because you've been witness to it all the way through The Mandalorian.
Yeah. I mean, it's evolved so much. It's actually a contender now to be taken seriously. Whereas, back when Battlestar was on the air, we got away with topical subjects that other shows couldn't touch because they were a show that was real, and we were fake. We were science fiction. We could talk about war, and we could talk about suicide bombings, and we could talk about these things, these sending children to war, and these things that were actively happening in our society at the time in 2003, that other shows were having a hard time touching on because it was tough. But we were just sci-fi, that we were allowed to do it. And that was beautiful. I think that people now have sort of really embraced that science fiction is just the backdrop. It's not what it is. It's no different than a cop drama in Wyoming. It's just, Wyoming becomes a character just as much as space becomes a character. At their core, they're all just dramas, about people. And so I think that that's how sci-fi has shifted. Very much so. Sci-fi now, I'm hard pressed to think of. I mean, of course there are, but the majority of science fiction now doesn't have aliens. It doesn't, or it does, and they look like humans. So, I kind of miss the old days, the 80s and 90s sci-fi sometimes, where things are just fantastical and weird. But because now it's also so largely based in, could this really happen scientifically? Okay, great.
Sometimes you just need some toasters in there.
Sometimes,
some classic Cylons.
Someone criticized the Netflix show that I created. And one of the things that they were like, it's just so stupid. And I was like, does everything have to be a metaphor for the human condition? Can't shit just blow up? Like, does it have to make sense? Can't a person's, nervous system just pop out of their bodies? I don't need to know that it could actually happen. Was it cool? Yes. Great.
Well, it's very cool work on The Mandalorian. So thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me, Katee. It's been fantastic talking to you. If you're out there watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep with us the rest of this season. Katee, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Have a great one, Sam.